Are you a Muslim who's married or looking to get married? I'm sure you've heard that more than 50% of Muslim marriages are ending in a divorce. Now that's unfortunate, but there's help out there. My name is Hina Mirza. I'm a registered psychotherapist with a specialization in Islamic counseling. And I've been working with hundreds of couples building healthy, happy, strong marriages. Sign up for the course that I just completed with Happy Strong Family to foolproof your marriage and make sure that you have all the right tools and all the right skills to lead a healthy, happy, strong life with your partner.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, everyone. This is Brother Mushtaq with the Happy Strong Family live stream coming at you every Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern. And this time round, we are going to focus on the power of storytelling. Just even off air, I was discussing with our very special guest, Ustadha Maryam Sinclair, who's here on a tour, that even with my own 3 children, I've interwoven aspects of my own personal family life many a time into this podcast series, that with my 3 children, they still sneak away my phone and they watch a lot, whether it's YouTube Shorts or Instagram, whatever. But let's use this hour or so to really discuss the power of storytelling and how storytelling can potentially even reconnect us with our children. As parents, I grew up in an age where, yes, parents would read, bedtime stories to their children before, turning in for the night, right? Mom or dad would have a storybook. They'd read to you as a child and you'd fall asleep, right? Now it's like, oh, please turn off the phone. That's what it is in 2024, right? Again, May 2024, that's just a sign of the times. So Ustadha Maryam, tell us now your own personal journey into becoming an author, and why really we as parents or as an ummah should really kind of rekindle a passion and a respect for Quranic storytelling.
Mashallah, what a beautiful suggestion. And I just want to begin by thanking you for inviting me to be here.
You're
and
welcome.
I want to salute you for what you're doing, for the initiative that you have. And I'm behind it 100%, 150%. And it's also one of the things that I feel most passionate about as well, supporting families and, yeah. Well, I grew up Catholic.
Okay.
I grew up a passionate Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being 5 or 6 years old and being in my house and feeling this tremendous longing and love for Jesus and for Mary. And I remember crying over missing them, wanting to be around them, wanting to be with them. And then I grew up, and when I was 15, my mother died, and my father remarried,
Mm-hmm.
and he married a Lutheran woman, and and she had 2 teenage daughters.
Okay.
And so I started being active in their Lutheran youth thing, and for a couple of years. And then I don't know, I remember being in church and hearing this message about Jesus being the Son of God.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt myself rise up in a revolt. I knew it wasn't true. I knew that Jesus had come here to teach me something and had taught me something, and that's what I knew that he was a prophet, and I knew that he was in service of Allah and not the Son of God. And at that point, I think I certainly drifted away from the Lutheran Church. And I think, actually, I remember being in university and going to some Unitarian church.
Okay.
And then after a while, that got even a little bit heavy, and I started hanging out with the Unitarian Fellowship. And then eventually I just left everything. I had no connection with Islam, no connection with Muslims whatsoever.
All right.
So you have to remember, this was like something like 60 years ago. we're
Okay.
talking.
Okay. All right.
And I was in Ohio, and then it was I don't know, I don't remember the timing, but I came to understand. Well, actually, yeah, I came to understand that there's a whole chapter in the Quran with the title of Maryam.
Yes.
And I came to understand what Islam was saying about Isa. And the moment I knew this, I was a Muslim. I just, that was it. You know?
Mashallah.
So that was, and that was maybe now like 50 years ago or something.
Okay.
Maybe 48 or so, I don't know, something like that. You lose track after a while. So what?
Well, so you're a Muslim, and now how have you transformed that or transferred that into storytelling?
Yeah.
Right? You write beautiful children's books.
Mm-hmm.
You are an author.
Mm-hmm.
What prompted you
Okay.
to take that next step?
Mm-hmm.
What was it? What was that lever to say, you know what? I want to become an author.
Yeah, I think it was, it actually happened, that piece of it happened before I was a strong practicing Muslim.
Okay.
I had 2 sons, and when they were something like a year old and 3 years old, my older brother died. Okay, and so I was with him in his last days.
Okay.
And I saw an amazing transformation in him. And even though he had never had any contact with Islam, he was very close to God, and he was very true to his own understanding of God. And I could see his being with him in his dying just opened my spiritual lenses as well. And in fact, it was maybe half a year after that I first did a retreat, an individual retreat with a group of Sufis.
Okay.
And I was asked to meditate on the light of Jesus. And what I came to in the beginning of that was being in my brother's room that night that he died. You know, that the first 2 days that I had been with him, he'd been just out of it with the medications. His doctor was saying he had a long struggle ahead, and he didn't really recognize me or know who I was. And I just stayed with him and stayed near him, and something about my own having been with my own toddlers.
Yes.
I recognized something that was going on with him, that he was saying things that didn't make any sense, but somehow I knew that they did make sense on some other level, you know.
All right.
Like I can remember one of my children, suddenly their father was out somewhere. There was a snowstorm.
Okay.
And suddenly he was running around the house saying, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." And 3 minutes or 5 minutes later, his father was there, you know. And there were other times where they would say something, and then later I was like, "Oh my God, that makes so much sense."
All right.
You know, so that's how I felt about what my brother was saying to me. Okay. So then I left his room and went to the coffee shop with my other brother. And then I came back at about, later that night, and I walked into the room, and he was up on his elbow, and he recognized me, and he saw me, and he said, "How are you? And how's your life?" And then sometime later, I left him and went back home back to his house to rest. And like 2 hours later, the phone rang, and he had passed peacefully, and it was such a lesson for me. So in this meditation about the light of Jesus, I recognized that what I felt in that room was that light. I knew that it was Allah. It was Allah's way of communicating to us that He is cherishing us and He loves us, and our whole life is about finding our way back to that. And so I had seen it there. And so then soon after that, I was, or maybe during that time, I was also working as a storyteller.
Okay.
And I was telling basically world folk tales and world literature. I was telling Homer's Odyssey. I had a fellowship from the Vermont Council on the Humanities to do a telling of Homer's Odyssey for a literacy project that they were doing in Vermont. And I was also, because of being with my sons, recognizing what role stories were playing in their life, that I would tell them a story, and then I would notice the next day that they were out there acting the story out. And then they would act it out again. They'd switch the parts around, they act out and play the other parts or whatever.
Right. Okay.
Or I would also notice, like, sometimes if they were upset or irritated or something, that I could just start as if I'm telling them a story. And like maybe they would wake up in the middle of the night and come to my bed crying, or I would hear them and I would go to their bed, and rather than switching on the light and say what's going on and being rational with them, I would just stroke them, just leave them where they were, just stroke them and say, once upon a time there was a ship on the sea and the waves were shining, and I didn't even know what I was going to say next, but then all of a sudden they're asleep.
Right.
So I was beginning to see those things in my own household. And then I was beginning to find those things in my work with children in schools.
Okay.
And so that was very, very strong by the time I began really connecting with the Quran.
Okay.
Then when I connected with the Quran, it was like, there came a time when my sons were, my youngest son graduated from high school, and they decided they wanted to go out to Alaska and work in the fisheries.
All right.
And so I said, I want to do something with Islam. I want to make a deeper commitment. And by that time I was in Vermont. Still, I didn't know any Muslims, but I did know people who knew people in Turkey.
Okay.
And so I went to Turkey, and I wanted to memorize the Quran. And the reason I wanted to memorize the Quran at that point was because I had been memorizing pieces of the Odyssey, and I had been seeing what happened to that material inside of me, and how my understanding of it deepened and deepened and deepened, and that's what I wanted. So I started learning the sounds of the Arabic, and started learning to recite things, and started a little bit of memorizing, nothing really formal. What I really wanted was to go into, I would see these classrooms where there were 50 kids, and they were all reciting the same surah over and over again, and that's what I really needed, but I didn't find my way to that at the time. So anyway, it was really in encountering the Surat Yusuf, actually, and the episodes of Musa alayhi salam. And I was so astonished by the power of the material, and so puzzled by why I couldn't find anything written in English that carried any of that heart, any of that beauty. It was either very poorly translated stuff, and I imagine that the things that I was reading that were translated from Urdu, I imagine that those must have been amazing works, but the translations didn't bring anything through, And then I started noticing even that a lot of the things that I was reading, the details weren't consistent with what was in the Quran.
Okay. And
so then, alhamdulillah, Allah put me in a situation where I had, there was a tafsir scholar, a very accomplished tafsir scholar, who had been a Syrian man who'd been trained in the Yemen. His name is Sheikh Ali Hani, and he's in Jordan. And at the same time that he's a tafsir scholar, he's also a scholar of the Arabic language.
All right.
So he can tell you what one of the ancient meanings of one of the words is, and that if you get something from that meaning that gives you something about the ayat, it's just, that's the kind of understanding. And I started working on my text of the Bowing of the Stars when I was in Turkey, and I was like looking into Turkish tafsir, and just trying to stay with the text of the Quran, and he was interested in what I was doing. And then he was willing ultimately to sit and listen to every sentence. We had another one of his students was Sahel Hanif, who's now the head of the Zakat Foundation in England.
Okay.
And I would read a sentence from the text, and he would translate to Arabic. And then Sheikh Ali would either say, okay, that sounds all right. Let's go on. Or he'd say, no, it can't be that because of this and this and this. Or he'd say, oh, let's see what the scholars would say. And he would come to every meeting with a stack of old Arabic tomes of tafsir. I saw him once walking. He was going to someone else to do a lesson, and he had his stack of books with him, and the top one was open, and he was looking at the book as he was walking down the street.
Wow.
He's just, the passion is just incredible with him. It's such a gift. And so this telling of the Bowing of the Stars was basically born out of his understandings of the tafsir and of the language, and yeah, so that's what happened. And so we did that with the Bowing of the Stars, and then while I was working on that, I was really puzzled by the fact that there was no English telling of the events of Musa alayhi salam. That was all in one book. It was all in one place. It just didn't exist that I could find it, let alone what language it was in or how it was written, you know.
Right. Okay.
And
okay.
so I remember having this thought, well, that's probably what you're going to do next. And it was like, that's, I can't do something like that. But then that's exactly what happened. And we actually went through the same process with the story of Musa alayhi salam.
Okay.
With Sheikh Ali and with Sohail Hanif. And so that's what I'm doing on this tour is the part one of that story of Musa alayhi salam. And that is, I'm just dazzled by it every time, and this is like, I think I've told that story literally to thousands of people on several continents.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just scratching the surface.
What I find so impactful is the fact that you make all of the material, the Quranic material, the Quran, the ayah, the surahs within the Quran accessible. And that to me makes everything relatable, makes it a reference to young and old alike. And that to me holds so much power. And within that power, there's truth. Yeah. So it's almost like, to me, and alhamdulillah, being here within Masjid Dar al-Iman in Markham, we've had our fair share of many an Islamic scholar, whether it's Ustadha Maryam Ali Khan, we've had Sheikh Yasser Khadi, we've had Sheikh Omar Suleiman, we've had, Maulana Tariq Jamil from Pakistan, the three other scholars from the US, and each one of them has their own style of telling a tale, a truth from the Quran. Mm-hmm. Your method is your own method in that it's storytelling. Mm-hmm. But I find each one of these four scholars are storytellers in their own right. Mm-hmm. You're a storyteller who publishes books, right? So here's the hard copy. I'll do that. You move out of the camera, right? Now, let me just read an excerpt of this. The Bowing of the Stars. Patience, trust, and forgiveness from Surah Yusuf, the Quran's best of stories, right? Now, let's see. Amidst the chaotic symphony of bustling life, donkeys braying, merchants calling out their wares, great carts groaning along laden with clucking hens and crowing roosters, this book invites you to taste the unwavering patience and triumphant victory of Prophet Yusuf and his grieving yet persevering father, Prophet Yaqub, peace be upon them. It will captivate your heart, young or old. So, stories like this. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on why our children, like we were discussing off air, May 2024, I personally think now as a father, I'm coming up to 50 years old in October, think that, and we've already discussed this, the phone is where all the children are now, including my own 3 own children. So how can we use storytelling as a mechanism to bring them back, to reconnect with the Quran?
Yeah.
Right? Every scholar, yourself included, why do you all do what you do? So that we either maintain a connection with the Quran, reignite a connection with the Quran, or perhaps even establish a connection with the Quran. Again, whether you are on stage or whether you're writing a book, these are all simply mechanisms to bring us closer to the Quran.
Mhm.
So what are your thoughts then?
Well, first of all, I want to
Sister
say that
Maryam.
I'm not a scholar. That's important to put out there in the
Mhm.
beginning. These are the things that brought me into the work in the first place.
Okay.
And when I first began the work, I mean, I began the work of writing before I had really found my place in Islam,
Mhm.
and before I had gone to Turkey.
Okay.
But when I went to Turkey, what I was most concerned about, and I think, yeah, it became, my main concern became reaching people with spoken word,
Mm.
reaching
right.
people without the printed page.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's so easy to forget that Islam came into the world not as a printed word on a page or
Absolutely.
a printed word, a permanent scratching on a surface at all.
Mhm.
And that it was very strongly established among huge populations of people without them ever having that printed thing in their hand.
As an oral tradition.
Exactly. And I knew that at the time. And part of the reason I knew that at the time is that I had, for 10 years before I left to go to Turkey, I had created a summertime storytelling school.
All right.
So I had, in the first session, this happened because I was on this Vermont Council on the Arts Touring Artist Register, and I was going into schools, and I was teaching children to tell stories. Okay, so I was going into schools, and I was sending a preparation packet beforehand. And by the time I got to the school, the children had already gone through several folktales, and each one had chosen one. And then I worked with them through the residency to create their own telling based on the idea that when we experience something extraordinary, our first response is to tell it. We have to tell it. We can't.
Mm.
And we don't think back, sit back and think, how am I going to tell that? And it's nothing like that. It's like, and so bringing the children to a point where they could experience that with their stories. Okay. And that was really, that work really was fruitful. That we would have, to end the residencies, would have storytelling festivals in the school where maybe 1 hour session where some of the braver children would tell their story to the whole group, and then break them into groups of 10, and that where the rest of them could tell their stories. And so the people, they were learning this. And so I was doing that, and I thought one day, I wish I could do this all day long. And that's when I started hatching out the plan to do a summer residential storytelling session, which was just a 1 week session, and it was for kids 8 to 12.
Okay.
And they would arrive at the school first of all, I'd send preparation packets home to the families. I rented a private school that was on break in the summer. I had a staff of teenagers that were going to help me with the running the camp, and I had 20 kids in that first session. And so they would arrive their parents would bring them on a Sunday night, and then they would stay in residence, and we would work together through the week, taking care of each other, learning how to support each other, learning how to work as a group, and then each person working on their own story.
All right.
And then the parents would come back on the following Friday night, and there would be a storytelling festival where all the kids would tell their story. Even if it was 3 hours long, we would take breaks for refreshments and stuff. And the parents were staying overnight in the school. And then the next day there was a potluck breakfast, and the parents would be involved in some of the workshop activities that we had done. So that went for 10 years before I went to Turkey.
Oh.
And so the first year was, I had these kids from 8 to 12. The third year, I had kids that had reached 12 and wanted to continue. So then I added a 2-week session for teenagers.
Okay.
By that time, I was taking the kids to summer camps to practice their stories near the end of the week. The teenagers I took to the correctional center, because by that time I had been hired to tell the Odyssey in the correctional centers or other stories in the correctional centers.
Okay.
Now, mind you, this was 35 years ago.
Right.
All right.
Got it.
I don't think that this can possibly happen today, but I will never forget what it was like to be there and watch a 15-year-old girl tell a story about a man who lost everything his wife and his family and everything because of the choices he made.
Yes.
Telling it to these people that were in there. And it wasn't planned. It wasn't like, okay,
Amazing.
these guys need to hear. And it wasn't. And they were just, they were so much in the story. And
Yeah.
Allah only knows what benefit might come from that.
100%. 100%.
So that
Absolutely.
had already happened to me. But then now there was the power of the Quran was, was something else. And I just wish I could remember what the thread was.
Well, we'll get to some questions first.
Okay,
Maybe that'll prime the memory. Producer Kashif, we already have a number of questions
Oh,
on the
mashallah.
question board here, please.
Yeah,
Exciting.
Jazakallah. We have some lined up from Instagram also.
Mashallah.
So yes, before we get to the questions, I'll just share this on the screen also. It's Sister Maryam Sinclair's Instagram. So if you follow her, there's all sorts of information on there, links to her YouTube channel, inshallah. I'm sure the links to purchase the books are also available there. If you're watching from Canada, I think for those books is the one we purchased it from. Is there a specific one for Canada or?
No, that's a good one.
Okay.
But I'm also going to be at later on today at Abu Bakr Mosque, and then next week at the Mississauga Nexus.
Yeah, the
Neighborhood
Muslim
Nexus.
Neighborhood Nexus, yeah. So yeah, if you go to if you are in the GTA, if you go to her Instagram, there's all the details of mashallah the tour stops while she's here in Toronto. And then I also want to give a shout out to Seedlings of Jannah who are
Please.
Podcast, mashallah, sister.
Without her, this tour could not have happened.
Alhamdulillah.
And next in line is Basira Education. Without them also, it
And
could not have
yep, that's the
happened.
next one we have queued up right here, Basira
Mashallah, very
Education.
good.
So please
Great.
follow them also,
Yeah,
inshallah.
yeah.
And we'll put those links to purchase the books for those that aren't in the GTA and attending the events, where you can also get them in the description. So
Great.
please check that out.
Their audios also. The
Oh,
audios, there are 5 audio books on the website, and it's the audios that's I think it's the audios that really carry the work, and it's the reports that I get from parents about my 7-year-old just wants to listen over and over and over and over again to the story of Musa alayhi salam.
All right. The audio.
Or I walked down the hall and I heard the voice of my 5-year-old, and then I suddenly realized she was reciting sentences from the story of Musa alayhi salam.
Okay.
Or when the kids got together, they were conferencing on Musa alayhi salam. I mean, this is what really brings them in, and this is why I started.
All right.
It's like I want to put these things into something that is captivating,
Mhm.
that children will want. And now you might put an audio in front of a child and say, "Here, listen to this," and walk away, and you might get a result, but you might not. But put them in the car.
Yeah.
And go down the road and maybe stop and buy a box of strawberries and put it on the stereo system, and without saying this is for you, put it on for yourself, and then watch how your children get drawn into it, because in the audios there are sound effects.
Yes.
And there are professional qaris reciting the ayats.
Okay.
And in the case of the story of Musa alayhi salam and the other, actually all of them except for the bowing of the stars, the ayats are given as the story is being told.
Oh, wonderful.
So you hear the ayat and then you hear the English of the ayat.
Oh, wonderful.
And so then you take your child from being very familiar with that to the point where they get to memorizing that surah. And that's going to be a different experience for them. So now I know this,
Okay.
and they're just going to go deeper with it.
All right.
And that's the part that I just want families to understand what can happen for them if they're encountering this audio experience together.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah.
Ustadha Maryam.
So yeah, it actually answers one of the questions, because one of the questions that came in through Instagram was would you recommend the audio versions of the books or actually reading them to your children? And I think it's probably depending on the situation that you're in, like you said in the car.
Absolutely. I would say first the audio, but also you can't. I mean, reading to your children is essential.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
And then the one that you've probably gotten a lot that also came in through Instagram was, what age do you start reading to your children? I know you've been also a certified doula, so I think I know what your answer is.
No, I wasn't a certified doula. I was a renegade doula.
Oh, renegade
I was
doula,
working
there
in
you
a
go.
place there where there was no doula, and so I learned what I needed to learn, and I did it for about 12 years or so, and mashallah, alhamdulillah. But I don't want to claim that I was certified.
So one of the questions was, when do you start reading to your children?
Yeah, I know people that start reading to their children when they're in utero, and I'm all for it. I'm all for it. In fact, I heard about native people in Africa, where the mother, when she discovers she's carrying a child, she composes a melody for that child and sings it to that child constantly while he's in utero, sings it to them when he's born, sings it to him all his life, and if she is around when he is dying, she sings it to him again. I would just love that.
Wow.
That's
beautiful.
And I mean, this whole thing about listening, we go along as if it's nothing, and yet it's the first thing that a human can do. The human is listening inside the uterus.
Oh.
And that's measurable.
Yes.
That's measurable.
Yes.
And listen is the first word that Mevlana Jalaluddin Rubi used to open his Masnawi. First word is listen. And then it is reported that Muhammad, may Allah bless him and give him peace, said, be an ear, listen.
Right.
And so this is,
right. That whole concept of being an active listener.
Exactly. Yeah. Or even passive listening. And that's another thing I'd like to bring up is that it's only been in the last maybe 100 years, maybe even less, that children have had children's material prepared for them. Before that, for centuries on end, children were learning at the side of their parents. Children were there playing on the floor while their parents were discussing things, listening passively.
Okay.
And gradually, as Allah developed them and their understanding developed, gradually being able to understand more and more. And that's how children learned. And don't tell me it wasn't successful. I mean, how did we get where we are?
For
okay.
Sure, yeah.
So all this stuff that's prepared for children, I don't have much patience with it, to tell you the truth.
Valid point.
And that's why with the Bowing of the Stars, I never thought I'm going to write this for a 6-year-old or a 4-year-old or a 2-year-old.
All right.
Okay. I'm just going to write it for the material and for the sake of Allah.
Amazing.
And so I can't tell you how many people say, I've had people say, my son, my 3-year-old doesn't want to go to sleep unless he can be listening to your CD. Oh. And then I'll hear from her, 2 years later, I read the material to him and he could understand everything.
Great.
Yes. Or my 4-year-old was listening to the Bowing of the Stars, or she would listen. I think it was the story of Musa alayhi salam, the fall of the tyrant. She said he was listening and kept saying, "What's that? Well, what does that mean? Well, what does that mean?" And she said I would stop it and explain to him, and then we would go on. But when his father came home, we told him the story.
Oh.
You see, so
Wonderful.
we can't measure these things.
Yes.
So to try to quantify them and then put it all together and for children, it's an impoverishment.
Oh,
it really is. Just like
so well
don't
said.
get me started.
So well said, and such great relatable examples, right? Real life examples that you yourself have come across. Producer Kashif, more questions, please.
Yeah, we have some more questions. I also had a question. Mashallah, my son Yusuf, 6 years old, and my wife. What's that? Hearing some feedback. Yeah, better now. So my wife and my 6-year-olds attended the session yesterday in Pickering and Masjid Usman, and my wife was saying my son was so captivated he just couldn't keep his eyes off you and ears off of you, and so Masha, I'm wondering, like, obviously we just saw the end performance. What was the process in the background? Like, how much work went into that to make it happen?
I have said this 1,000 times. Working with the story of Musa is like trying to wrestle an octopus into a box.
Okay. Oh, great.
And that's how it was before I started learning the history and the archaeology that's available to us.
Okay.
There were maybe 6 or 7 years when I was just simply, telling the story, working with the story, without any context, sort of, like, well, we can't tell, we don't know where this was, so and then I started learning what we actually do know, and I started seeing how the clues they're all from so many different places, and they all point in the same direction. It's really astonishing. And so now, when I have in front of me, inshallah, the project making a book of Musa alayhi salam.
Yes.
Now the octopus suddenly has 47 more arms than it
All
did
right.
before.
Well, it's a worthwhile endeavor.
Inshallah.
A worthwhile endeavor.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Yeah,
And
please
tonight,
make dua.
for sure,
Yeah.
you're going to be at Abu Bakr
Mhm.
Masjid, inshallah, in Scarborough.
Yeah.
What time tonight?
I think it's 2:30.
2:30. Okay. Well, this afternoon rather.
Yeah.
right
Yeah,
after
and
this.
I'm going to be telling the story,
Mhm.
but then I'm also doing the slide presentation after the story, which is the presentation of the historical and archaeological aspects that are known.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Producer Kashyap, let's get to some more questions, please.
Yes, mashallah, we have a question. So we have someone saying, mashallah, may Allah bless Sister Maryam's efforts with ease, success, and immense reward.
Ameen.
And you too, all of you.
And then the question that's coming in is tips for amateur, and then in brackets, parents. So tips for amateur storytellers to make the books they read to children more captivating and engaging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the very first thing is dua and intention. Set your intention with all its aspects for reading to your children. Why are you trying to forge this relationship with them, and what are you hoping as an outcome for that relationship? Because I'm sure it's not just that they're going to take care of you when you're old. And then in terms of the material, it's the more you know about the material, the more fun you'll have telling the material. So,
Okay.
and it's using the capacity that Allah Mighty Majestic has given us to imagine the reality of something. Now, when it comes to telling the stories of the prophets, it's really critical to remember that the thing that sets Islam apart from everything else that's in the world is that there's been a tremendous effort to protect the truth of the message.
Yes.
If you could, like, just talking about using the imagination, imagine that you could pull yourself up off the planet and turn and look back and see the planet spinning there, and recognize that all over the planet there are people studying and working, and there has never been a field of inquiry that has captivated more people worldwide over centuries than the body of hadiths and the life of the Prophet and the Quran.
So, yes.
It's amazing to think about.
Absolutely.
Really.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is that everything that we're getting out of we have to remember that what we're finding in the Quran, that the Quran is what brought us the information, for instance, that the universe had a beginning, that it's not something that's just always been there. And, that's something that scientists only discovered a little while ago.
Right.
And they thought they were so cool discovering it. Well, hello. Or the Quran is what brought us the information of exactly how does the baby form in the mother's womb.
Right.
What are the 3 layers of darkness? What is the chewed lump of flesh? All of those things were completely unknown to humanity until just in the last, very short period of time, with all this sophisticated equipment and education.
Great examples.
Alhamdulillah. So that's why whatever we encounter in the Quran, we have to really take it seriously. And if it's something that we can't fathom, then we have to make dua about that, and wait and watch and research, and expect that Allah Mighty Majestic will show us the way to that when He's ready. And that's a whole different response to the truth than what we've seen in the past.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
It's really talk about storytelling. The Bani Israel, they were taken out of Egypt. Immediately they started going back on their covenant. They weren't out very long before they saw somebody bowing to a statue, and they were like, yeah, make us a statue. That's what we need.
Yes.
And it wasn't very long after that before they were dancing around the golden calf. And it wasn't long after that before they were defying their prophets and eventually trying to kill their prophets. And at that point, that's one of the key pieces about the life of Isa alayhi salam, is that it really marks the end of that time when they were carrying the revelation.
Right.
You know, and it seems now it seems to me, and this is just my own, I'm not a scholar, but it seems to me, looking back, we're 3,000 years down the pike, we can look back and we can see that, you know, it's like what they have done since then is just continue to be deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into torment. And everything that they're doing in the world today is just, you know, that test.
Right.
And more of that test.
Right.
And so it's very interesting to me that they have a folktale about the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov was their religious leader.
Okay.
And according to this folktale, in the earliest days with the Baal Shem Tov, there were rituals and prayers, and everybody knew the words of the prayers, and everybody knew the objects were used in the rituals, and everybody knew the timing when that should happen, and everybody knew the place where that should happen. And all these things were in place, and they were strong.
All right.
And then centuries went, and they got a little bit weak, and they forgot the locations.
Okay.
But it's okay, because they knew the timing, and they knew the du'as, and they knew the objects, and you know. And then a little bit more time passed, and they forgot what some of the objects were. But it was okay, because they knew the words, and they knew, you know. And it goes on and on and on until they have lost everything. But it's okay, because we know the story.
Right. Okay.
Yani, it means it's okay, because we can just make it up.
Yes.
And this is how I grew up in the Catholic Church, you know, in Christianity. Well, you don't know, but you can just make it up. Make it up.
Okay. Okay.
Well, that's not what Islam is.
Right.
SubhanAllah. We have been given this access to the truth, and we really have to live up to it.
Yes.
You know, we really have to live up to it. It's really sobering to think that the Zionist children can rattle off their whole miserable pack of lies. They all can say it. They all can tell you this is why it's our land. We have the truth, but how many of us can rattle off what exactly happened?
Yeah.
And how did they lose? You know, what's the reality that they were given? Yes, Allah Almighty Majestic tells us, we made a people considered weak and of no account, inheritors of the lands that we have blessed. The fair promise of your Lord was fulfilled for the people, Bani Israel, because of their patience and their constancy.
Yes.
But what does that mean? That promise wasn't given to them because of their race. It was given to them because of the covenant they made.
Right. Well
And
said.
then they broke the covenant.
Yes.
Okay, so now here we are. What are we doing with the covenant?
Right.
How much are we aware of what it really means to break that covenant?
It comes back full circle, doesn't it, Ustadha Maryam, that how much of our own Quran and how much of our own traditions, through the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, through the Sunnah of the other prophets before them, you know, Isa alayhi salam, Jesus, you know, Musa alayhi salam, Moses, Abraham, in Arabic, Ibrahim alayhi salam, right?
Yeah.
So through the power of storytelling, and the way you connect the dots is so beautiful, to Catholicism, to Judaism, and now to Islam. It's with Islam that, you know, you have now authored these books. So let's get to some other questions, Producer Kashif, because I know we still have some more to get to. And I'm just mindful now of the fact that you have to get to Masjid Abu Bakr.
Oh, and I really have to be early. Oh,
well.
God, yeah.
So not to rush the process, because I find you are so wise in your advice, alhamdulillah, in just such a retrospective, high-level understanding of history, of the oral tradition, alhamdulillah. A master storyteller, alhamdulillah, mashallah. So let's get to some more questions. So you can impart, again, this wisdom to others, please.
Yeah, inshallah, I do think we do have to wrap up, because I think her ride is waiting. So inshallah,
Okay.
we'll just
Can
take
I just put out a
few more
call
questions.
to if there's anybody that's
please.
going to be anywhere near Abu Bakr Masjid? I really need help getting the keynote presentation set up with
Okay.
with the two devices. That's what I'm most concerned
Okay.
about.
You've heard
Maybe
the call
somebody
right
will
now.
show up, an angel will
Yes,
show up or something.
inshallah, some
Okay.
IT support for
Yeah.
Ustadha Maryam, please.
So we'll just wrap it up in the next 5 minutes, maybe, with a few
Okay.
questions.
Yes.
So one question. So you were saying, to answer that question, you were saying know your material, and for a lot of parents, the switch sort of switches when you become a parent, right?
Mhm.
And you're like, okay, some of the things maybe you didn't learn, you got
Mhm,
now learn.
mhm,
So as
mhm.
far as storytelling goes and engaging with your children
Mhm.
that way, based on your experience, would you recommend sort of Surah Yusuf as the starting point? Is that like, Allah describes it as the best of stories? Is that something a parent should know really well?
I think the starting point needs to be what you love, what the parent loves. Because what you love and what you're willing to dig into and what you're willing to try on in your, just imagine that it's happening to you. Those are the things that are going to open the energy to flow.
Mashallah.
So, yeah.
Such great advice.
Yeah.
Such great advice,
Alhamdulillah.
Ustadha Maryam. And again, what strikes me is you speak from the heart.
Inshallah.
You speak from experience.
Inshallah.
And you speak from a point of being genuine.
Inshallah.
I can tell, alhamdulillah, I've done a number of episodes. I've lost track as to how many I've done, but I find with yourself in particular, you speak from a place of sincerity.
Inshallah.
Alhamdulillah.
Inshallah.
So may Allah bless you.
Alhamdulillah.
May Allah continue to
Can
bless
we
you.
say something about wings?
Please,
Yeah.
by all means.
Wings. This was a book that I wrote for maybe 12 to 15-year-old teenage girls is what I was thinking about when I wrote this book. This is the fictional journal of a girl who learns that her mother is dying of breast cancer. She's diagnosed with breast cancer. And so then she journals her life through the time when her mother's disease gets worse, and then her mother dies, and then she recovers, basically. And as I was writing this book, I kept feeling like, oh, you can't say that, it's too Islamic. And finally, I just said to myself, look, I don't care. I'm just going to write it the way I want it to be. And then it ended up winning a prize in the UK Muslim Writers Association. So that was a really huge lesson for me.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah.
That, we need to do what we're doing for the sake of Allah and
That's
not
it.
anything else.
Absolutely.
And so as I would just say that as a parent, look into what it is that you love and what are your intentions for wanting to pass these things on to your children, and let it come from your love for the material. That's what will.
So well said.
That's what will make
so
a
well
difference.
said.
Yeah,
Alhamdulillah,
so,
mashallah,
alhamdulillah.
subhanallah. May Allah continue to bless you.
Alhamdulillah.
And may He continue to provide you with a long and healthy life, that you may
Inshallah.
impart this beautiful, beautiful wisdom upon others. We
Inshallah,
need
subhanallah.
more people like yourself who selflessly and tirelessly do the work of deen.
Inshallah.
So with this, I'll wrap up.
Okay.
For
Thank you
any
so
parents,
much.
as Sister Ustadha Maryam Sinclair said so beautifully, be true to yourself. And as a parent, impart upon your own children what you love. And yes, there is a bit of self-introspection about that, but in the end, it will make you a better parent, and your children will be better for it. So thank you for once again for tuning in. Tune in often. We broadcast live every Sunday, and we bring new guests every episode as well. Jazakallah khair for watching.